Hey there, this is going to be a review for our Castles and Crusades campaign, session 78. I had 4 players at the table for this session, so we had the characters Sprawl, Lort, Cosmo, and Renee. Picked up where we left off last time. Party's in the town of Arden, kind of their home base, and they're intended to head towards the mining town. And if you followed with our campaign, the mining town was a place that they helped liberate early on in the campaign. Seems like a long time ago, but yeah. So they're headed there. They're with Durgan Ironhelm, the dwarf that kind of oversees the mining town, and their goal is to follow up on or investigate these hobgoblins that were found outside of the town, the mining town, and that were bearing gold that was minted at Helgrim Hall, which is a ancestral home to the dwarves that was lost over 200 years ago. They don't have any issues getting to the mining town. It's a pretty well-traveled and patrolled road, so bad encounters on that road are pretty rare. They do have to make one stopover, and there's even waypoints along midway for caravans and stuff to make such stopovers, and they do. And there's other caravans going there. There's a lot of activity in the mining town. It's very busy anyway, but now with the people of Arden and Iredale Stronghold preparing for war in the spring, there definitely, there's a uptick in production of weapons and armor and stuff like that. So there's a lot of traffic. So they share this waypoint with caravans, and there's a big central fire pit, and they're all gathered around it. I believe Lork went and did some hunting and came back with he came back with a deer, and which Renee put to good use. And the following day, they continue on and they make it to the mining town late in the afternoon. So they retire to Wiggum's Ale Tent. It's not really a tent anymore. It's a full-blown structure as the mining town has developed over the years and prospered. It's still called Wiggum's Ale Tent by everybody, but it's not a tent anymore. They're, washing the taste of the road off and just having a relaxing moment. They notice, though, and it gets busier, with the people coming out of their shift in the mine to work. They see Bothild, and she is in a verbal altercation with a man. And she reaches out and just, they can't hear what's being said, but she suddenly just reaches out and just grabs him by the throat, pins him against the wall, and just starts lecturing him. And Lork and Sprawl get up to intervene, and they do. And she storms outside, and Sprawl follows her while Lork kind of smooths things over with the guy and buys him a drink. And he accepts Lork's apology, and he apologizes. He didn't mean to offend her. He's not even sure how he offended her. They were just having kind of a regular conversation. And then she suddenly got very angry. Outside, Lork finds her, and she is pretty enraged, and she like picks up this barrel, this water barrel, rain catch, and just throws it and smashes it, and then grabs like this board, and she's sitting there and she snaps it, and he gets her to sit down, and he sits next to her, and they start talking, and then he can see that she has tears like coming down her cheeks, and she is not sad. She's so angry that she's crying, like and Sprawl begins, to talk to her a little bit more, and she starts to talk about like the effect of being under the thrall of the broodmother has had on her, and that all she can remember is seeing the lights, but then not being able to control herself, and then ultimately even attacking Lork is just like frustrated and angered her beyond belief. And they have she asked Sprawl if he's ever felt helpless before, and he's like, yes, I have. And he talks about being held by the Goblin Witch when they had and being rescued at Iredale Stronghold by the rest of the party after being captured. And it's kind of a sobering moment for her, and even more of a bonding moment for her, because she starts to calm down, and her and Sprawl share a drink or two and just kind of like talk into the night, and until they eventually return to the common room. But she sits quietly, like she's calmed down, kind of withdrawn a little bit, just contemplating. But they just talk about that, and one of the things that they talked about was, she can't. This isn't her first outburst since being rescued. And he talks about basically telling her she needs to channel her rage, and like, it's fine to use it in battle, but she can't just, willy-nilly be, letting it loose. So she's sitting there kind of stewing about that. The next day, they all head up the spot where they found the hobgoblins, where the patrol had found the hobgoblins, was above the mine in the mountains, the Brackbur Mountains, which is what the mine is set into, but above the entrance. So they go up there, and sure enough, they find this campsite, and it's over a week old now, but it has a great view of like the entrance to the mine, and overlooking the mining town. So it's a really good observation post, which is not lost on the party. They find tracks that run north and south, and they decide, a contingent, and they send. Initially, Lorik asked Durgan, who's with them, to go back to town and send a raven. In the setting, you can use, much like Game of Thrones, you can use ravens for communication. I take that a little step further. If you've ever read any of the John Gwynne books, they use ravens in those books too. And this setting was actually, a lot of it, I took inspiration from John Gwynne's books, and the way the ravens, some of them can actually talk. Send a raven to Iredale's stronghold and request that his patrol of wolves come to Arden. And Durgan agrees to do that, while the party decides they're going to follow the tracks south to find out where they go. They do that. They follow, and it's leading through the foothills of the Brackbur Mountains. Lork's up ahead on Fenris, and at one point he's up ahead doing a scouting like he normally does. And at one point he doesn't see what it is, but there's some sort of disturbance. He hears a little bit of scuttling, sees some dust rising up along the hill, kicking up, but he can't see what it is. And he just continues on, but is cautious. They go a little bit further, then all of a sudden, coming up over the rocks, is this massive multi-legged serpentine, serpent-like creature. And it's got scales and claws and a big mouth of fanged teeth. And above board, it's a behir, and it's hunting. And it's hunting Lorik. And Lorik sees it and realizes he doesn't really want to mess with that, at least by himself. So he actually hops on Fenris, his warg, and they turn and ride back towards the party. And the party kind of in the distance can hear like this. It's loud, like the thing, running across the rocks, its nails scratching. And that's one of the things Lorik had actually seen, was its claw marks earlier in the stone. So they think something's up. So they start to move ahead a little bit. Rene activates his boots of speed so he can try to catch up with Lorik, and bam, beelines off ahead. And he comes around the corner pretty much just as Lorik's coming down this hill in the trail, and just with Fenris on the top of Fenris, and Fenris is at full tilt, and all of a sudden, cresting the hill behind him, he sees this behir. So they're like, oh boy, and they get into it. Cosmo and Sprawl and Bodhild catch up, take up position a little bit back. And the battle ensues. The thing lets out a lightning bolt that hits Lorik full on in the chest, fails his saves, takes a pretty sizable chunk of damage. It ends up like in one round doing multiple attacks to Rene, getting him like wrapped up, not crushing him, but it's raking him. So like it's doing automatic damage with its claws. It's not able to attack anybody else while it does that, but it's doing auto damage to Rene. And Bodhill runs in to help. I believe Sprawl cast a spell on her that would lessen like slashing damage and such, which was a wise move. It's wise to cleric. And she runs in to help, and they're battling away at this thing, and it is a pretty good fight. Like, and but they ultimately defeat it, of course, and they take time to actually butcher it up. You know, obviously Renee wants to make pretty much everything he can find food. So, but there's like valuable stuff in there, and Lorik goes to butchering it. He's never butchered it before, but I had him roll a check and for like wisdom, and he actually rolled a nat 20. So I was like, okay, whatever you get what you want. They harvested a lot of claws. They actually got, I have no idea about the biology of a behir, but they got whatever gland it was that helps it produce this lightning. And they grabbed that with Barry in mind, in case, you know, he might want to try to do something with it as a spell component or something. Make a wand. I don't know. Something. They grabbed it. And they grabbed a little bit of like its hide and stuff too, and chucked it all in the portable hole that Cosmo carries. Don't want to overshadow this actually, because this is important. The killing blow was done by Cosmo, and he did it with his new sword, his sentient sword, Woe. And he stalked it for 3 rounds successfully, and then got an assassination attempt on it and killed it. And when that happened, he described, had Chris, who plays Cosmo, describe it. And he goes up and he stabs it in between its scales. And I added to the description that the behir is like thrashing during its death throes, and it cannot thrash its way off of the blade. And Cosmo sees rivulets of blood coming down the blade going into the hilt. And when that happens, a blood red rune that he hadn't noticed before lights up. There are, I might get this wrong, but there are 4 other runes that are now visible. And he can now see that there's 3 unfilled ones, if that makes sense. And then when it dies, he's able to pull the blade out. So that was a very important kill. So that was fun. So we'll see what happens with that. And they, like all good adventurers, Lorik tracks the behir back to its lair. So because they want to find some loot, which they do. They found a few things. It had eaten somebody because there was some like adventuring gear. They got some, I think some expert weapons. There was a magical shield though, a scroll with a 4th level clerical spell in it, and there was a backpack that actually radiated magic. It was kind of like. I think it was Sprawl that figured this out. Like they were putting in items in and out, and then every item that like Sprawl would think of would immediately be on the top. It's called a dimensional backpack. And I think actually Sprawl's the one that kept that. So I think that he was the one that's now using that item. Pretty neat item. It'll save him time if they have to like jump, middle of battle and need to pull out a potion. He can reach into his backpack and it's boom, right there. So he won't have to waste a lot of time doing that. So then they continued on, and they end up having to make camp, and the trail leads them to the edge of the Darkmere. And the Darkmere is this one of the swamps in this region, and they've been to the Darkmere before a long time ago, earlier in the campaign, but it's winter and it's frozen over, and they camp. Lorik now has the Ring of Nourishment that Barry once wore, but he turned that over to Lorik. So Lorik only needs to sleep like 2 hours a day, and technically never has to eat as long as he has the ring on. So he sleeps for a little bit, and then he takes watch for the rest of the night, so everybody else can just sleep through the night. And nothing happens. I roll for random encounters. They don't get any. You just hear some random sounds from the mountains, wolves howling in the distance, other stuff, but nothing threatening. They the next day they follow the trail, and it leads out into the Darkmere itself, and they start like island hopping in these little frozen islands. And when they were on the Darkmere before, it was summertime probably, and they had to have like boats and stuff to navigate it because it's it's pretty large, and there's some pretty big open expanses of water, but they're able to follow along this trail that leads across these islands. And there are some ice crossings and such. Lork's up ahead a little bit, not super far because just the size of the terrain doesn't permit it. But he is shot at by a hobgoblin's sentry. There's actually two of them, and they, they make they poor archers, I guess, in this case, because I don't know if they hit him or not. But the guys are starting to get, like, the fighter types are starting to get pretty decent armor classes that are rather tough to hit at times, so which is good for them. The party makes short work of these hobgoblins, but they smartly, to their credit, I was wondering if they would do this. They capture one of them. They don't kill them both. And Lork interrogates the hobgoblin that they have, that they capture. And he tells them that Draka, who they know is the leader of the hobgoblins to the north, and he rules out of a stronghold called the Bastard, which is also, as they now know, the western entrance to Helgrim Hall. He sent them to spy and to petition Sivdak for aid, he tells them. Their characters are not familiar with Sivdak. However, the players are, because in our other adventures with the B team, they entered, the B team crossed part of the troll lands, and they learned of Sivdak, and he is the troll king. And so they decide that they can see where the sentries were. Shortly after them, it opens up to a big expanse of ice where it's probably, I think I said it was like 100 yards or more across of open ice. And then there's a larger like landmass, and it's covered, all this landmass is covered with, swamp trees and shrubs. It's all frozen this time of year. There was some talk of trying to like burn some of this down. It probably wouldn't have worked very well due to the icy frozen conditions, but they know that it's wherever the encampment is, the hobgoblins are, it's probably on that big landmass. So there's some debate on what to do. They don't really relish the idea of crossing 100 yards of open ground on the ice, which they would have known this, so I described to them that it's going to slow you down, it's going to restrict your movement because it's slippery. You don't have ice spikes and stuff like that to use. So they talked about maybe flanking and circling, but it's a big area, and it would have taken them more time, and they're unsure if they would have even found a good place to do that with. So they ultimately decide that Cosmo and Lork are going to try to go across in just like a recon mission. And they start to do that, and they go, they see some movement, but they're not attacked coming from the landmass. And they realize we are in the wide open, like they're going to spot us. Maybe they don't know what we are, but this is like stupid. And they turn around and go back. They ended up actually killing the hobgoblin they captured. So they ultimately decide, because there was some talk about going to the island and trying to attack whatever was there. And they ultimately decide not to do that. They stash the bodies under the ice. Funny enough, there was talk of Rene with his armor. He can swim underwater and breathe underwater, using that to go under the ice to get up to the other side. They chose not to do that, and that'll come into play later, why that probably wasn't a good idea. They take the head, Lork takes the head of one of the hobgoblins, and they decide to return to the mining town, warn Durgan, and prepare them, because they feel that the mining town's probably likely going to be attacked. So they do that. I rolled for a couple random encounters, but we didn't belabor the travel. They don't have any, and they're able to get back to the mining town, and they speak with Durgan. They use Speak with Dead. Sprawl uses Speak with Dead, and Matt, who plays Sprawl, has a really creative way of how Speak with Dead works for him. So because Throster, the brewing god, the dwarven brewing god, is his god, he has to pour ale in its mouth for it of the corpse for it to speak. And he does that with the hobgoblin head. And it tells them that he asks a bunch of questions. Speak with Dead's a tough spell, especially for the DM, because he really has to come up, he doesn't get to really pre-plan it too much. So he has to really come up with all this stuff either on the fly or have a ton of knowledge for what's going to happen. You never know what their players are going to ask. So, but they ask a lot about the plans for the hobgoblins and the trolls. And basically they learn that there's a lot of hobgoblins and there's a lot of trolls. And one of the important questions that they asked was, is there any, do the hobgoblins and trolls have any outside help, as far as, is there something else that they have in their, their retinue? And the hobgoblins makes mention of something called the Big Snapper. And either they question him more, or they just determine that it's a giant snapping turtle. So it was at that point that Steve, who plays Renee, was like really glad that he didn't decide to go underneath the ice to try to get up to that other big landmass. So they do a little bit more. They asked a bunch of questions. I didn't highlight even half of them, but it was just trying to nail down logistics. Some of the questions the hobgoblin didn't know. He just didn't know that part of. Either he wasn't part of that planning operation or whatnot. He just didn't have the answer, so he just didn't answer their question. But they do know that Draka from the Hobgoblin Warlord sent them south to basically recruit King Sivdak, the Troll King, and take out the mining town. And Lork, with that knowledge, has another raven sent to Iredale Stronghold to the chieftain there, Mormac, requesting all the wolves of Arden and his apprentice Bruin come to the mining town as soon as possible. And also gives them, a briefing on what's happening here. So that's where we left off for the session. They also did learn that the hobgoblin leader of the ones that are going to attack the mining town is a hobgoblin named Barrick. So yeah, that's where we left off though for the session. Real fun session. Everybody had a good time. I had a good time. Went an interesting route. I thought they might get to the big island there and do some stuff there, but we never did. So the Bahir combat was the only combat that we had, which was interesting because I actually came up with that encounter as a random, I say. It was pre-planned, but random encounter. Maybe a few hours before the session started, I wrote it up. So just as a little extra in case we needed it. But yeah, that was it. So we'll meet again later in February. We're playing towards the tail end of February. There's a lot going on, so there won't be any CNC updates for a bit. But we have Shadow Dark and such going on, so we'll be able to talk about that stuff. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate watching and following along, and I will catch you at the next one.